All right, for more on the international response to the conflict in the Middle East, we are joined by Israel's special envoy for combating anti-Semitism, Michal Colter-Wunsh. Michal, thank you for joining us on this show. Can I just for a second ask you about this ground invasion that we're all anticipating? The whole world is watching, and Israel's defense forces have been warning that they're about to go in. This is going to be a very tricky situation for these soldiers because of just the way the Gaza Strip is laid out. Can you talk to us about how difficult and challenging the situation is when you consider the tunnels, booby traps, and all the things that they'll have to face, the civilians that are still inside Gaza, including Americans, and those 150 hostages that you're looking for? How difficult will this be?
So Aisha, first of all, thank you for having me on, and you're 100% right, as are all of the reporters that shared with us the difficulty and the challenge. I want to be very, very clear, and I think that your question also highlights it. Whereas the State of Israel and its soldiers, the Israel Defense Forces, is engaging in this war to protect our borders and Israel's civilians, Hamas, a genocidal terror organization, actually uses civilians as human shields or pawns, if you will, hiding beneath hospitals, beneath schools, beneath mosques, actually preventing them from using the humanitarian corridor. The entrance of ground troops, if the State of Israel were not so completely committed to protecting human life wherever possible, would not be necessary, because as you can imagine, there would be better ways for the State of Israel to be able to attack Hamas genocidal terrorists that, I remind us, on Saturday morning surprised us with thousands of rockets and ongoing barrages of rockets, which you mentioned before. Each one of those rockets, a double war crime, being shot at and targeting Israeli civilians from very, very heavily populated neighborhoods within the Gaza Strip, endangering those civilians. And I think what that highlights, and actually must be very clear, is that it is Hamas not only responsible for the barbaric acts of terror that we saw, in which thousands were murdered, burned, raped, abducted, injured over the October 7th and in the coming days that we've had, but also in what will result in this ground incursion that the State of Israel must take, as any responsible country must, in order to defend its borders and its civilians from this continued ongoing war.
Michal, we know your enemy is Hamas, and we know that this is obviously a very almost impossible situation as long as Hamas continues to hide behind civilians. But someone was talking today about how this could be avoided. Let me play a clip for you from the CEO of the Anti-Defamation League on how this can all be avoided.
This could end today. It could be stopped if the Hamas would give up the hostages and say they were going to put down their arms and work out a means to live in peace with Israel. The organization with the power to stop this is Hamas.
Is there a world in which you see that could actually happen, where Hamas, perhaps with the regional partners influencing Hamas, coordinating together to try to do some sort of an exchange?
So there is a world, Aisha, in which that can happen if global powers and the organizations that are actually mandated to uphold, promote, and protect international law, and actually should be concerned with Palestinians as well, of course, as Israel's rights to defend itself, if those countries were to lean in and actually end all funding, all source of aid, all source of what empowers Hamas genocidal terror. And I remind us, Hamas is but one proxy, as you mentioned before, of the genocidal regime in Iran, alongside other such proxies that have waged this genocidal war against humanity, against civilization. So it is actually that combination of countries, institutions like the UN, like the Red Cross, that have to step in and lean in and ensure that if we were to actually activate all of the possible leverages that we have, including vis-a-vis Egypt and Turkey and Qatar, that host and house the leadership of Hamas, that hides not only below civilians, but actually out of the country, well, yes, we could stand up to genocidal terror if we were clear that there is no moral equivalency and that The world that cherishes the values of life and liberty will not have the continued sort of false moral equivalency that actually enables and empowers Hamas to continue using civilians, including Palestinian civilians, as human shields and pawns in this continued war.
Michal, thank you for the work that you're doing. I saw your tweet back to President Biden today, just reminding people and reminding the president of the messaging that Hamas sends to the people in Gaza as they try to make Israelis the enemy of Palestinians. We appreciate the work that you're doing. It's so important right now.
Thank you, Aisha. I think it's very critical that we understand that it's that anti-Semitism, that lethal anti-Semitism that fueled the atrocities that we saw on October 7th, but it also fuels the terrible and awful denial, justification, excuse for those atrocities, and it is that anti-Semitism that we have to be able to identify and combat together.
Encounter, yes. Thank you so much, Michal. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aisha, for having me on.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.